FAFSA Leadership Lounge, where we are going to discuss various policies impacting Florida school leaders. I am Michele White, Director of the Florida Association of School Administrators.
And I am Jessica Janasiewicz, and I serve as the lobbyist for FAFSA and a number of school districts here in Florida. We've just finished up week 4 of the legislative session, and it has been a busy one.
It sure has, absolutely. And pretty much every education policy and budget committee had a meeting this week with a number of bills finding success to move to the next step or maybe failing to move. So one in particular, the Senate Bill 814, which would have allowed for the carrying of weapons on college campuses, was actually voted down last week in the Senate Criminal Justice Committee. And while nothing is truly dead until sine die, this issue should not move forward to the floor. We are also seeing some bills get temporarily postponed in committee or on the floor in a true attempt to avoid an unsuccessful vote. In fact, currently we have about 60 bills that have not moved and could be dead just based off of timing.
Yep. And speaking of timing, let the budget work begin. We have started our budget work during this past week, and where both of our chambers, both the House and the Senate, met in their various subcommittees to pass their subcommittee budgets. This is the beginning of the budget process. All those little components from the subcommittees will then move up to the big committee, be put together, voted on by the large committee, ultimately voted on by the floor in both of the chambers, and then that's where we start the negotiations. So we're very much at the beginning, but we did get to see the proposals from both the House and the Senate for their education budgets. There's obviously a lot there and a lot to unpack, but just in a nutshell, here's what we know. The House provided an increase of about 0.7% to the base student allocation. They also keep these scholarships as they currently are within the FEFP. The Senate gave an increase of about $66.77, or about 1.25% to the BSA. So the Senate had a little bit more of an increase there. They also made the scholarship program as a separate categorical. So instead of running through the FEFP like it currently does, it would be a standalone categorical on its own. In addition to just the budget that they passed, both of the chambers have conforming bills. And those are bills that do just like what they sound like what they do. They take the numbers and the policies associated with those numbers and put language to them so that we know what is supposed to be done with those dollars. It conforms the budget to language to make it understandable. And as a part of that, we saw some pretty interesting policy.
Yes, and in fact, we have heard from a number of members about some concerns specifically around the potential cuts to the add-on rates that are for our CAPE programs, IB, ACE, AP. Those are right now proposed by the House, and we can see it in their conforming bills that they're proposing a 50% cut to the add-on rates. So they're keeping the FEFP whole, but then cutting that. And the biggest issue, as we heard from the subcommittee chair, was there was a survey conducted through the department that encouraged or created this other category, and a majority of, or a significant amount of funds were in this other category as opposed to directly benefiting those programs. So the House is using that as a base, and again, everything is still up for negotiation. This is the beginning of the budget process. So we're gonna keep calm, but certainly make sure that they have an understanding of what is in those other categories.
Absolutely. And also contained in both of the House and the Senate's conforming bills was language looking at the scholarship programs. They have some differences, but they both agree in their conforming bills that they would like to see students that receive a scholarship to get a student ID number, so that way they can actually be tracked to see where the money is going, and that way if they make a choice to go to a different choice option, we will know where they are at all times. So that is one of the pieces in there, and they are pretty extensive bills, so as Michele said, that will definitely be part of our negotiation as we head into budget negotiations.
Yeah, and I think that's to your point on the student ID number, they're hearing our district leaders talk about what a challenge it is to truly track those students as they move back and forth between schools throughout the middle of the school year. So hopefully we'll see some positive things.
Absolutely. Now, we also did have a lot of policy work going on, and in the House Careers and Workforce Committee, they heard House Bill 875, which deals with educator preparation. The bill looks to align core principles, standards, and content of Florida's different types of teacher prep programs. One of the few things it does is it requires the State Board of Ed to adopt a rule that establishes a uniform core curricula for all teacher prep programs, including 2 mandatory courses. It also creates a competency-based coaching for educator readiness and teaching, which would be CERT program, and repeals the professional learning certification programs and professional education competency programs following the implementation of this program. So they're looking to have kind of a universal set of standards for teacher preparation programs in the state. There is, it has a few more committees to go to, and it could be a place that some of our priority language could fit. In fact, we met with Representative Rizzo earlier in the legislative session, and we are set to meet again with him during week 5 to talk about possible inclusion of our language. So, as I said, there are those 2 House committees remaining. There is no direct comparison to a Senate bill, but there are a few out there where this language could live. So, as we get into the budget talks and negotiations start happening, bills can be added to other bills. So we are definitely on the lookout for that. We'll keep watching that bill.
For sure. And FAFSA is prioritizing really some professional learning pieces for administrators and the banking of hours for professional learning, and just making sure that that is actually for all educators, as well as for those that may be certified but are not currently associated with a school district, that they can maintain their certificate and potentially come back to our classrooms through earning that professional learning and being able to have an organization like a FAFSA that could certify those. So more to come on that for sure. But also, since we're talking about House Bill 875, I wanted to bring up something we haven't talked about yet in our last episodes, which is that there are state board rules that are under development all the time, and it seems like these are kind of in rotation, especially as we talk about teacher and school leadership preparation programs. So right now, the department has 11 rules currently scheduled to be amended at the state board meeting on April 9th, so coming up really quickly. 2 of those make amendments to our teacher and school leadership prep programs. They will probably be amended should the other bill pass once again, but these rule changes are based on bills from the 2024 session and really look to accomplish 2 things. The first is that language is being added to ensure that the programs have processes or procedures to ensure continuous improvement, and that there's review and modifications made if things are changed in statute. Those programs need to be updated. And then the second piece addresses statute language, which also prohibits programs to distort significant historical events, promote identity politics, endorse theories of systemic racism, sexism, oppression, and privilege, and thinking that those are inherent in our institutions. So again, these 2 rule changes will be up April 9th, and we'll be sure to share that as well. And there's another 13 rules under development, not even scheduled yet. So we'll have more time to talk about those in the future.
It's such an important piece of the legislative process that sometimes goes unnoticed when we look to see bills and budgets that are passed. But that work that happens in the executive branch after the bills are passed is really pretty important. It can really impact the way these pieces of legislation are implemented. And speaking of bills passing, we have started to have 4 sessions in both the House and the Senate, and both chambers did take up some education-related bills this week. In the House, they took up House Bill 85, which was the hazardous walking conditions bill. I think we talked about that on a previous episode. That bill, there was some consensus between that language from all the parties. That bill passed unanimously. And the Senate version of the bill still has two committees remaining, but it was heard in its first committee, so it has moved somewhat in the Senate. And they also voted on House Bill 921, which is the mandatory cursive writing instruction bill. That also got full support from the chamber. The Senate version has not moved as of yet, though, so we'll keep an eye on that one. Again, we talk about amending and where things can go. That's always an option. The Senate, for their part, considered Senate Bill 102, which implements a workforce credential program for students with that are on the autism spectrum. And they also took up Senate Bill 296, which was school start times. I think we talked about that we came to that, there came to the agreement. Both the House and the Senate bills are now identical. The Senate passed their bill this week. And then also they heard Senate Bill 356, which establishes January 27th as Holocaust Remembrance Day. So all of those bills were passed by the Senate, and they now head to the House for their consideration.
Yeah, so a lot is happening and moving, but we also have to remember there's a number of issues that they're dealing with outside of education, even though I will say education does take a lot of their time and effort, and we appreciate their focus and funding, of course, for our schools and support of our students. But here's some things that kind of were outside of education, kind of got some interest. One, the House Speaker is pushing a proposal to cut the state sales tax to 5.25%, which ultimately would save Floridians about $5 billion per year with a B.
With a B.
That's a big number. And of course, I'm sure many of our listeners have heard the governor has been pushing for the elimination of property tax, which we understand could help save Floridians money, but at the end of the day, it comes at the cost to our communities, our schools, law enforcement, and first responders. So there's more to come in what that will look like. The House also voted this week to overturn $5 million in vetoes that were made by the governor in last year's budget. So that money is going to go to local water projects, a payroll system for our state prisons, and a program for veterans in crisis. And we're starting to see where the House and the Senate are kind of flexing their own muscle of being a separate chamber, separate branch, and just trying to figure out what comes next.
It is certainly going to be exciting. This week is marking the halfway point of the legislative session. So we are almost halfway through. And as we get further and further into the session, we'll see less and less of our policy committees meeting, and we'll see more and more of our budget committees, our big appropriations committees meeting. And then we'll really see that budget negotiations really start to begin. So it's likely that a lot of these bills that we're watching may become bargaining tools as we make it through this process. And as they start their negotiations on the money side, then it could impact negotiations for policy as well. So definitely stay tuned for updates in the coming weeks. There should be a lot of excitement to come.
Absolutely. And I think that's about it for our update this week. We definitely want to thank all of you for listening. We encourage you to tell your colleagues about the FAFSA Leadership Lounge. Encourage you to push that follow or subscribe so that you get updates when new episodes are posted. Remember that the full list of all the bills that we are tracking this session is available on our website at fasa.net. And we look forward to connecting with you, hearing the areas that you're concerned about so that we can be better advocates for you in between when you're here maybe in the Capitol. And we look forward to sharing more updates. So stay tuned.
Thank you for listening to the Leadership Lounge podcast, presented by the Florida Association of School Administrators. Today's podcast was hosted by Michele White and Jessica Janasiewicz. The podcast is produced by Geoff. Special thanks to musical director David Higgins. Make sure to subscribe to the Leadership Lounge podcast wherever you find your favorite podcasts. New episodes are released each Monday. For show topic suggestions, questions, or comments, please email communications@fasa.net. We hope you enjoyed the show.